There is something so serene about the art of beekeeping. Bees are something that we irrationally fear, yet are so integral to our world. We often fear what we cannot understand, whether it's something as simple as a bee sting or as difficult as understanding what is going on in someone else's head. This book explores the complexity of people and, like bees, the communities we create. In this episode, we explore the plot, analyze characters, and delve into the themes of Mad Honey. The plot of this book was captivating. An alternating first-person perspective helped you understand the story from all sides. I do think it would have been interesting to hear from Asher, but I recognize that this is a feminist text, so leaving his perspective out was intentional. Also, it may have ruined the suspense aspect of the novel. It would seem that the main conflict of this novel is man versus man, or who killed Lily. But that's not where the story leads us. Yes, Olivia's story leads us to find the answer to the question. But Lily's perspective starts with the murder and then seems to move backwards and then forwards to help us understand her. So I do not think her death is the central conflict. I think both of these women are going through a conflict of identity. Lily is trying to figure out who she is in a world full of hateful people. And Olivia is trying to figure out her life separate from Brayden, which it seems like she hasn't fully recovered from. In the end, both of them find out who they are through self-discovery and through Asher. I only had one problem with the plot. Olivia's storyline was much more compelling to me because of the mystery. We wanted to know if Asher killed Lily or not. Since there appear to be no other suspects the whole time, you're wondering if it was him, even though he claims to be innocent. Olivia's storyline is leading us towards the verdict. However, Lily's storyline kept going further back in time to when Asher met Lily, or even further to help us understand more of Lily's background. I had a hard time with Lily's storyline because it did not further the narrative I was interested in. Therefore, I didn't want to read it at all, which is sad because Lily's perspective is meaningful and important. In many stories that are similar to this story, the ghost tells us about how they die. They lead us to that moment and show us that. However, I did think it was powerful that Lily didn't tell us her story. In this way, she gets to be alive. I think it was a good move for the authors, even though I was somewhat frustrated by the pacing. The climax of Olivia's story is when Asher gets the verdict of not guilty, but it's also right before that when Olivia sees herself in her son. She is able to see that Asher is not his father because he was saved by his mother. Beautiful. However, that isn't really the climax of Lily's story. For me, the climax of Lily's story didn't really happen because her time was cut short. She had just gotten to the good part of her life when it was taken from her. What do you think the climax of this novel was? I do think it's debatable, and I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. Overall, the plot of this story was engaging. There are many unforeseen twists and turns that keep us wanting for more. Initially, I was upset when we found out Lily was trans. I felt tricked, and I usually like being tricked, but not about who my main character is. However, I quickly got over that irritation and was happy that we got more insight into her character. About 75% of the way through the book, I was upset again because of the way the information was being given to us. Lily was able to change who she was to be her authentic self, but Asher was being portrayed in a way that he couldn't escape his biology. It just didn't seem fair. However, we learned that Asher was actually a kind and caring young man, and he had made a mistake, but he wasn't his father. I'm very glad that the author chose the ending of this book that they did. Speaking of endings, let's move to the resolution. In the resolution of this story, we get the biggest reveal of all. It was actually Maya who killed Lily and not Asher. What? I did not see that coming. At the moment of this reveal, Olivia connects all the major themes of this book together when she says, she was killed because someone was threatened by her being a woman. Then a bit later, there can only be one queen in a hive. When a queen dies, you can introduce a new one you purchase, or you can wait for the bees to create royalty. Then again a bit later, this has always been my favorite fact about bees. In their world, destiny is fluid. You might start your life as a worker and end up a queen. This quote connects to the idea of bees, feminism, change, and motherhood altogether. I also love that most everyone in this book gets a happy ending. Olivia and Ava receive clarity. Olivia has her life with Mike. Asher is able to move on and form a new relationship with his uncle. Just nice endings everywhere. It's only a shame that Lily isn't there to share these happy endings with them. Now let's explore characterization. I would argue that there are 3 main characters in this novel, even though we only have 2 perspectives. They are Olivia, Lily, and Asher. We're going to take a look at these characters and talk about their development through the novel. Olivia was my favorite character. I believe I connected with her because I am a mother, but I also loved that she was a strong woman. It is difficult to fully discuss Olivia without discussing her experience with Brayden. Brayden is a terrible partner to Olivia and parent to Asher. As Olivia said, he started out as charming, and then she realized his charm was his need for control. I think the saddest moment is when she has a baby early because Brayden pushes her down the stairs. Thankfully, Olivia gets her and Asher out of that relationship when Brayden harms Asher because Asher tries to defend Olivia. You would think that a doctor who takes an oath to protect the lives of those around him would treat his family better, but it just goes to show you that you don't really know a person. Olivia's return to herself is a slow journey. In fact, it seems like she doesn't really heal from her journey until this court case. But before we talk about that, we need to talk about bees. The bees save Olivia by providing for her and her son, but also by giving her purpose. I love that Olivia sees the world through the eyes of her bees. She compares many things that happen in her own life to the lives of bees. I think that many of us have something we are passionate about that help us see the world a little bit differently. Last semester, I had a student who compared everything to cars. I loved it. Here's a quote that shows Olivia's bee-mindedness. The medical power of honey is well documented. It's antibacterial, so it has been used in treating wounds. In dressing, it helps cleanse pus or dead tissue, suppresses inflammation, and promotes new skin growth. A 2000 study at Penn State suggests that it is more effective than dextromethorphan in treating a cough. Irish labs have shown that it combats MRSA infections. Manuka honey kills the bacteria that causes ulcers and is used to preserve corneas for transplants. End quote. Olivia's journey was beautiful to watch. It is clear by her brothers and Asher's reaction that she hadn't really talked about her abuse with anyone until she was in court with Brayden as her audience. It must have been difficult to keep all those emotions bottled in for so long. However, her moment of revealing all this information to the court also shows so much courage. I am pretty certain that she chose to reveal this information because Brayden is there, and she wanted to show him that he doesn't have power over her anymore. Such a meaningful and important moment for Olivia. And from there, she is truly able to move on from those feelings, which is apparent when she lets Mike in. Olivia is a well-written character. I loved being inside her head for a small amount of time and being able to understand things through her eyes. Asher is another great character. Although he's just a side character in this novel, he plays a huge part in both Lily and Olivia's life. In fact, you could argue that he meant everything to both of these women. Asher's journey in this book mirrors Lily's, but is just a bit different. Asher has to be strong because he was Olivia's protector. Olivia doesn't tell Asher much about his father to save him from remembering their history, but Asher protects Olivia physically. We learn that he beat up a kid in elementary school when he was talking badly about Olivia, and he continues to help and protect her as he grows up. However, like Lily, he grew up without a father. He didn't understand, like Lily did, that not all fathers are worth getting to know. Both of these two had hearts of gold, and I'm sad we didn't get the end of their story. It is Asher that brings up how similar Lily and Olivia are. They are both women who love science and sometimes hide their feelings in a tangle of facts. They are both survivors. Lily suffered abuse at the hands of her father, and Olivia was also abused. It would make sense that Asher would fall in love with someone who reminded him of his own mother. Asher's grief was the most difficult part of this book because he has to go through it alone. Normally, he would be able to rely on his mother, and although his mother loves him, she doesn't trust that he didn't kill Lily. This must have been devastating for Asher when he learns this. Asher plays a huge role in Lily's life, not because he was the first boyfriend Lily had, but because he saw who she was and accepted her anyway. I think that this was well handled in the book and well done. We didn't know about Lily and Asher's first fight until later. How he handled that situation and responded showed a great level of maturity, and I would love to say that it was evidence of great parenting. I loved Asher and Olivia's dynamic. This book shows how the parent dynamic shifts, but a child never stops needing their support system. Asher was sad that he never had a relationship with his own father, but he was still able to have an amazing support system in his mother and his uncle. Asher is a great son, and he's so understanding to his mother. He stands up for her. Even when they aren't on the same page, he still treats her with respect. I loved this mother-son dynamic. Now let's move to talking about Lily. Lily is such a lovely young woman. Although I was frustrated by the order in which we got her story, the way it was given makes so much sense for the overall narrative. First, we're able to see Lily as a girl, and then we're able to understand her history. This, I'm sure, is how all trans people would love to be viewed. So I'm glad Lily was given that opportunity. My favorite Lily quote is this: "I keep trying to be an atheist, but it won't take. In spite of how much garbage there is in the Bible, like all the instructions on how to treat your slaves and how women should pretty much accept that we're destined to be property of men, there is still something about faith that I cannot let go of. I don't know what this world is, but I know that it contains miracles that I cannot explain, and love that people have for each other is the biggest mystery of all." I connected with this quote because it encompasses many of my thoughts and says them so beautifully. I've been a religious person my whole life, but my favorite part of religion is love. That we have the opportunity to be loved and love others is the greatest blessings of existence. Lily's story was very powerful for me. As someone who is religious, I know that I have a bias about people who are transgender. For a long time, I sought out texts that would help me understand transgender people and how they must feel, and I still couldn't wrap my head around it. However, after reading this book, everything made sense. I'm grateful for the bravery of the authors in this book for sharing Lily's story. I'm sure they've received a tremendous amount of hate for this text, but I, for one, am grateful for it. Lily's story was powerful. How she overcame the difficulties of being transgender and battled to find her place was inspiring. The hate directed at Lily for just being herself was difficult to read. I know that this is something many trans people deal with all the time. In fact, there was just a little girl on the news who was bullied and almost beat to death because of this issue. That is just devastating. But Lily faced this trauma head on, and although she did attempt suicide, she found a way to be herself again. This journey is inspirational. Here are some quotes that stood out to me regarding this topic. My mother pretended along with me, and then one day she just lost it. You're not the only one who's forgotten how to be happy, she said. And that finally woke me out of my stupor. I couldn't sacrifice myself. I tried. I couldn't drag her down with me. Not after she'd given up so much already. So I asked my therapist to help me build a ladder and crawl out of my pit. My shrink told me that if I couldn't remember how to not to be sad, that I had to fake it till I could make it. Then later, after Lily had achieved a goal that she set, it says, "It was stunned understanding. She looked at me like I wasn't a ticking bomb, but instead an inspiration. Maybe we both can do anything. I can get a new job. We'll move east." A bit later, it continues, "She didn't try to cheer me up or tell me that I was wrong, to think I was a shattered thing that could never be put back together. She didn't actually tell me anything for once. She listened." That night, when I was 16, my mother and I stopped pretending we were fine. Everything was fine. A couple weeks later, we had a new plan. I felt something foreign inside me that I couldn't even name. Like I was carbonated. Like if you shook me just a little, I'd explode. I couldn't define it as hope, not even when it was coursing through me. This journey that both Lily and her mother were on was inspirational and beautiful. Yes, it must be painful to pick yourself up after losing your father and friend, but her journey taught me about resilience and about how you can find hope after losing it. Let's move on to talking about themes. The first topic that is most clear in this book is feminism, or the power of women. The thing I love most about this novel was its power to empower women without bringing down the men in the book. Many feminist texts I have read have terrible men and only terrible men in them. This text does include terrible men like Braden and Lily's father, but it also shows beautifully respectful men like Asher and Mike and Jordan. This book highlights the suffering of women without dwelling in those thoughts, and I found it refreshing and empowering. Yes, women go through a number of difficult things, but that's not what we let define us. Speaking of definitions of women, let's look at this quote. As we drove east, we kept thinking up a list of all the things that people use to define women, but we'd always find an exception or some rare difference that belied the binary definition. Until at one point my mother suggested that being a woman for someone might mean just not being a man. Mom said that had been true for her, that being a woman meant being someone who can get talked over in conversation or ignored, someone who gets judged as a body instead of a sentient soul, someone who, no matter who you are or what you are doing, always has to be on guard, lest someone decide that you are going to be his victim. But maybe that was true for Mom. Won't have to be true for me. I'm not going to be a victim ever again. I'm going to live my life with power and fierceness and with love. Don't worry about me, Mom, I tell her. I'm a survivor. End quote. How do you define womanhood? Did reading this book change your definition or make you rethink your definition? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. There are so many powerful female characters in this novel. The bees, Olivia, Maya's mothers, Ava, the bookstore owner, and Lily. These women fought for those around them and showed great strength in their roles. Here's a quote I love that sums up this idea. We could learn a lot from bees, frankly. Girl bees run the world, and worker bees are all female. They feed baby bees, shape new cells out of beeswax, forage and store nectar and pollen, ripen the honey, cool down the hive when it's too hot. They are also the undertakers, working in pairs to drag out the dead. Women are a powerful force for good, in both the world of bees and in our world. It's always great to read examples of powerful women who have overcome hardship and pulled their lives back together. As I mentioned earlier, this book made sense of transgender people for me, and it did this in two ways. One, by showing Lily's story and allowing her to live an authentic life. And the other were the powerful quotes by Lily's doctor. Here is one. Transgender? I like to think about it in terms of handedness, Dr. Powers explains. If I asked you to sign your name with your non-dominant hand, it would feel weird. If I asked you to describe it to me, you'd probably say things like, the pen doesn't fit comfortably in my hand, or it's awkward, or I have to try hard to make it legible, something that I can do with my other hand effortlessly. It feels forced. End quote. This makes something that seems so abstract more tangible. Everyone knows what it's like to write with their non-dominant hand. It feels awkward. Being transgender is like forcing someone to write with their non-dominant hand their whole lives. It feels wrong. I love how Olivia deals with the news that Lily is transgender. Here's a quote from her thoughts. In college zoology classes, I learned that there are plenty of animal species that can change sex. It's called sequential hermaphroditism. Clownfish are all born male, but most dominant one becomes female. Wrasses work in reverse, with a female being able to transform her ovaries into testes in about a week's time. The slipper limpet, when touched by another male limpet, can become female. In other words, it's perfectly natural. She goes on to explain that while she had studied this in species, she had never thought about it in transgender people, in the human world, and having the luxury of not having to think about it. I related to this. I've had a few transgender students, but I myself had not have a transgender child or had any thoughts like this. I love that she goes to the source to figure it out. In the conversation with the bookshop owner, Olivia thinks to herself, how similar does someone have to be to you before you remember to see them first as human? I think this gets to the heart of what the authors wanted us to take away about people, that we're all human and in the end, it's the most important thing. Not our differences, but how we are really the same where it matters. Here's one last quote that I loved in regard to this subject. People want the world to be simple, but gender isn't simple, much as someone might want it to be. The fact is, it's complicated, that there are whole spectrums of ways of being in the world is what makes it a blessing. Surely nature or God or the universe is full of miracles and wild inventions and things way beyond our understanding, no matter how hard we try. We aren't here on this earth in order to bend over backwards to resemble everyone else. We are here to be ourselves in our gnarly brilliance. End quote. Something I think that goes hand in hand with this idea is the idea of motherhood. I think an interesting comparison is Ava and Olivia. Both are spectacularly strong mothers, and although we don't see as much of Ava, we can only assume that because of the person Lily was, that she is kind and caring. I love that both Ava and Olivia found themselves in animals and nature. Yes, they both had to leave their marriages to save their kids, but they are similar in so many more important ways. I think that Lily and Asher find each other because they're mothers, and I love that these two finally found closure in the end. There is a set of moments that I like to discuss when it comes to motherhood. These are quotes pulled from a number of places in the book that show Olivia's thoughts during the trial and with her past with Braden. Olivia says, I have known abused men. I have loved abused men. I have lived with abuse. Beneath my thighs, I cross my fingers, and I know what an abuser is when I see one. I can tell you without a doubt, I lie, that Asher is not abusive. Then a bit later in the conversation with Asher, do you think he could have changed? I stare hard at Asher. Is he wondering about his father or himself? It's because whether or not I choose to admit it, some part of me has already found Asher guilty. A few scenes later, it says, "Here is what Asher does not remember, and what I will never tell him. On the day that he came between Braden and me, when Asher clung to his leg like a barnacle, Braden plucked him off and hurled him across the room. There he struck the wall and crumpled. I could suddenly see tooth paths clear as day. I thought, I will not let him hurt my son. I will not let Asher become a victim too. I would save this boy even if I lost everything else." Then a number of pages later, Olivia and Asher are having a conversation, and this revelation comes to light in Olivia. This is probably my favorite moment in the book. Here is Asher. "When Lily told me she was trans," Asher said quietly, "I didn't know what to say. I was scared, yeah, and freaked out. I didn't want to betray her by telling anyone else, even by telling you. But I wanted to. I thought, what would Mom say? And then I figured it out. I went back to Lily and I told her how sometimes you run into people who you knew when you were married, and they always say something in code, you know? You're like a different person. And you always just smile and make a joke and say, you're the person you've always been. I told Lily that when you were with Dad, he wanted you to be someone you weren't. If you stayed with him, maybe you would have made yourself into that person. But it wouldn't have been you. It would have been who he said you were." Asher looks up at me. Then I told her I loved her. Her. Then a little bit later, Olivia says, "He knows I'm talking about all of it. His pain, his innocence, his truth. And it's not because of a Hail Mary witness testimony or a blood disorder. It's not because Asher isn't like Braden after all. It's because he's like me." In spite of everything that has happened to me, I still believe in love, and so does Asher. This moment was everything. I think it's easy to see our kids in a certain way when you see them grow up. You might see them as the small people they were and the mistakes that they have made, but it's hard to take a step back and see the whole picture. Olivia had fallen into this trap, only seeing her son through the lens of her tragedy that she hadn't worked through. However, in this moment, she was able to let go of the notion and see Asher for who he really was, someone like her. For me, this was a life-changing moment. I love how the authors captured this moment and all of the emotion. It's brilliant. The last topic this book covers is love. What did you think about Asher and Lily's relationship? Was it toxic, or was it a typical teenage romance? I, for one, think that Lily and Asher worked. They understood each other on a deeper level. However, they were both pretty selfish. That is not abnormal for teenagers to be self-centered and only see things through their eyes. There were a number of quotes that I loved regarding this subject, so let me read a few of them. "It feels strange to flirt, like being dropped in a foreign country where you're not fluent in the language. But even then, you can get on gestures, on nods, and shakes of your head. You can build your own language until the day you dream in it." Quote 2. "Here's what they do not tell you about falling in love. There's not always a soft landing beneath you. It's called falling because it's bound to break you." And quote 3. "Do not listen to anyone who tells you a broken heart is a metaphor. You can feel the cracks and the fissures." End quote. Your first love is so important for figuring things out. Do I think that Lily and Asher were forever? Probably not, but it's possible that they could have worked through their issues and become strong together. However, falling in love is fun and painful. There was one last quote that I wanted to look at. People always talk about how their love for you is unconditional. Then you reveal your most private self to them, and you find out There are many conditions in an unconditional love. End quote. I thought this quote was so very powerful. We would hope that all of the love we had was unconditional, but we can see from this book examples of love that were unconditional and loves that were not. Love is such a powerful piece of who we are. Living alone is a sad existence, and there are so many different types of lonely people. But the heart of the matter comes down to being understood and accepted. I think the purpose of this book was to show us that we are not all that different at the end of the day, and that everyone deserves to be loved. Overall, I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. The storyline was engaging, the characters were lovely, and it helped me to see and understand people who are different from myself, and that's always worth reading. I also loved learning more about bees and other random trivia. This book had so many layers to it, it made me think about things for days. The writing is fantastic, the characters were relatable and real. The plot was intriguing, and it helped me to see through different eyes. What more can you really ask for in a novel? Thank you for listening to this episode of According to Your English Teacher. If you would take time to leave me a comment or write a review, that would be so helpful. Also, make sure to subscribe to According to Your English Teacher on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and it helps more people to find my podcast. I'd like to leave you with a quote. We are all flawed, complicated, wounded dreamers. We have more in common with one another than we don't. Sometimes making the world a better place just involves creating a space for the people who are already in it. This episode of According to Your English Teacher was written by me, Sam Gunther, and edited by Down Gunther. The music was written by Tom Brenton. Thank you for listening, and happy reading.